All right, on this episode of Bouts Talk and Bouts, happy to be speaking to a well-traveled wrestler. I'm going to be getting in some traveling through Canadian wrestling's elite. Has some shows coming up in Alberta, talking about Grand Prairie and Edmonton, and just really looking forward to talking to this individual today. I've got Warlord on the show. How's your day going so far there, man?
Good, it's going good, man. Just busy, but yeah, it's good.
And I'm kind of wondering, like, is this your first time visiting some of these markets here? Like, is this the first foray into Grand Prairie, Alberta? And if that's the case, are you excited for, some of these dates coming up with the tour?
No, I'm excited, man. I think Alberta's great. Canada's a good place, man. I've been to Edmonton, of course. I've been to Calgary. Haven't been to, I believe it's Grand Prairie. Haven't been there, and haven't been to some of the smaller towns.
And it seems like you have a bit of experience with CWE as well. Like you had a show with them out in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where you beat Kevin Cannon there. What's it like, kind of, working with those guys and getting in some touring with CWE?
They're a great organization, man. They're a young and upcoming organization. They got some really, really good wrestlers. They got some really good-looking wrestlers, and they put on great shows. People really love it.
Yeah, absolutely, man, for sure. And just, such a well-traveled individual. You've really done a lot in your career. I'm kind of wondering, like, did you ever have a preference between like working in a tag team or working singles, like, or did each kind of like function in its own way, and it was kind of enjoyable in like their own sort of way?
Yeah, each has its own entity, and that's something that's really good about it. I love tag because you have a partner in that stuff, and you can do all the you can do all the stuff behind the referee's back, in and out, and all that stuff. Plus, you can feed off each other out there, which is really a lot of fun. But also, when you do it yourself, you can command the audience and that stuff. You get to work with the audience more personal in that, which is a lot of fun against another individual out there, and you can put on a great show.
Yeah, absolutely. And doing my research, I thought it was interesting that you were talking about, being an amateur wrestler, like to the point where you were like a multi-time national champion and, also playing hockey, which as a Canadian, I appreciate seeing that too. But you also had said you thought about maybe doing UFC kind of stuff if you were younger, like maybe getting involved in some mixed martial arts. Like, what are your thoughts on mixed martial arts? Are you like an avid fan of it nowadays? Because it seems like on a storytelling level, at the very least, like kind of similar narratives to what one would see in pro wrestling.
I think mixed martial arts is great, man. It's a tough sport. You gotta learn stuff. You gotta learn on the ground. You gotta learn the wrestling. You gotta learn your jiu-jitsu. Then once you get to your feet, you gotta learn your striking. You gotta learn the Muay Thai. You gotta tie everything in together to be a very, very good, successful UFC fighter in that stuff. And it takes a lot. It's a lot. It's a hard life in that stuff. You take a beating, but you can also give a beating also.
Yeah, absolutely, man, for sure. And just it seemed like the lifting was like a big thing for you back in the day. What do you think your biggest lift was? Like I was seeing certain things going around talking. You were like bench pressing around 600 pounds. But do you have any like best lifts? Like any like I guess like max reps that you're like particularly proud of over the years?
I didn't really do a whole lot of just singles because of course, we were on the road all the time. People don't realize we were on the road 320 times a year. We were always on the road, so we never got breaks. But, I would do usually at the lowest about maybe 5 reps. And I did I believe it was 550, I remember right, 6 times benching, almost a 7th rep. That was up in Denver, Colorado. In Minnesota, where I lived at the time, I did a 275-pound curl for 5 reps, almost 6 reps. So I did a lot of weight back then.
Yeah, for sure, man. And like just kind of coming off the MMA thing too, I noticed with some of your like security guard work that you've done stuff with like Kimbo Slice and stuff like that. And like from what I was seeing in my research there as well, I believe you were there for the Seth Petruzzelli fight. What kind of an environment was that like? Because I remember when that was going on and shocked a lot of people as it was going on and just like pandemonium in general. What was it like to just be in the thick of it when all that was happening?
Oh, it was great. Let me tell you, Kimbo was a good man. He was a family man. He had a good heart in that stuff. I'll tell you right now, he's one of the hardest punchers I've ever seen. Because I could sit on the other side of a door, and I could hear him hit that bag to the door and just a thump, thump. Just you could feel it. He could hit. He just didn't have a lot of ground skill in that stuff because, of course, he started later in life in that, through the YouTube and all that. But, it was so much fun. Especially down here in Fort Lauderdale, down where I live and that stuff. Taking him out to the ring and that stuff and being right there and seeing everything and that stuff, just seeing the people. He's one of the grandfathers that actually put MMA on the map on national TV and that stuff when it came out. I can't remember if it was CBS or I believe it was CBS if I remember right. And to have it nationally televised, I mean, that's the first time for MMA that happened, and it got UFC started into it now.
Absolutely, and he was a guy who just had like a tangible presence about him, like had a real larger than life kind of feel to him. And I've seen certain interviews, like you did an interview with Lanny Poffo, where you were talking about how certain guys maybe need to have those like bigger gestures nowadays in the ring, and maybe getting better with like the crowd interaction and telling stories and just kind of being larger than life. What do you think a young worker needs to do nowadays to like be that larger than life character and elicit those kind of reactions from the crowd?
Well, first of all, you just got to get their talking down. Your talking now in professional wrestling is probably half, maybe more than half of what you do for the ring and that stuff now. You get that down. You get your gestures. You get your facial expressions down. You get something that's catchy with the people. It's so important. I mean, The Rock had one of the best where he just raised his eyebrow and said, "Do you see what The Rock is cooking?" Or you got Hulk Hogan. I mean, look what he did. He's just a guy larger than life. And that's what these younger guys got to learn. They don't have to do a lot of stuff, but the stuff they got to do, they have to do it perfect and make it look really good and get it across to people and be personable with the people. The people want to be a part. First of all, our sport is one of the only sports that you can actually have the fans be a part of your match and make it that way. Let them enjoy it. They love that. That's what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been in some very interesting matches, like sometimes where you're in like a pretty precarious position. Like you had a series with the Road Warriors where you guys were in those scaffold matches. And I mean, you seem to almost take it in stride, like in a casual way. You're saying like, "Oh yeah, well, I know we're going to be the ones taking the fall, going to blow your knees out and everything doing that." Was there any level of apprehension or I guess anxiety with like the scaffold match in particular?
Hate them. Us being so big, I mean, you think of it, you just land one time wrong, and your knee's gone. Something's gone, and your career could be ended. It could be ended right there that fast. It's a tough thing to do. I sure in the heck knew the Road Warriors were going to take the fall from that guy named Hart. So I knew it'd be Barbara Meade to be the ones taking the fall.
And I mean, your history in pro wrestling directly tied to the Road Warriors, as I mentioned. Like you were working out at a place that was literally called the Gym in Plymouth, Minnesota, and they kind of just saw you working out and figured you'd give it a go. What was that moment like for you? Because I understand that you were like a big fan of like AWA and like some of the Nick Bockwinkel stuff. So what was it like just kind of working out and someone's like, "Oh, hey, you want to be a wrestler?" Must have been a thrill.
Yeah, it was great. It was funny because one of the stories I liked was when I was young and I won my first national title in AAU wrestling when I was a kid. I think it was in fifth grade, if I remember right. I went to Missoula, Montana. I pinned all 8 of my guys in less than 30 seconds, and I get the best wrestler award at everything else and that stuff, And when I came back, the Vern Gagne put me on when I was a little kid on the AWA show, which was so cool and that stuff. Here I am. They're talking to me and that stuff, and of course, being young, you don't know what to say. You just sat there and smiled with all my medals and that stuff, But it was really cool in that, But of course, when I got a little bit older, watching AWA with all those guys, and of course, living in Minnesota, that was a thing because it was on televised all the time. So it was a fun show to watch. And then, of course, when the Warriors come up, it just, just totally changed. Admiral Hawk, I mean, they changed tag team wrestling completely when they came out. Being big, the way they hit that ring with that face makeup on and that stuff, the spikes, I mean, just threaded a whole different attitude into professional wrestling for tag teams and that. And of course, work out their gym at Plymouth, Minnesota, which was one half of a gym. And I knew that they worked out there, and also one day, Animal came up, he approached me, and he started talking to me, and he goes, "Hey, kid, you know what? You should be a professional wrestler." I just said, "Wow, all right." He talked to me, and we talked for a while, and then he set me up, of course, with Eddie Sharkey, which taught so many of us in Minnesota, and it just kind of went on from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seemed like you were trained quite well by Eddie Sharkey there, but I'm kind of wondering like how is it to like impart your knowledge to some other people as well? Because I was seeing on some outlets that you've trained certain people. Like I saw Roderick Strong was a name that had popped up. So what's it like being able to, I guess, like pay it forward and be able to like impart your knowledge to the next generation?
The biggest thing I got to tell them is, if you really want to be a professional wrestler, when you're young like that and you're getting into it, you have to eat, you You have to eat it. You have to sleep it. You have to dream it. That's all your life is about. I mean, you're kind of being selfish, but that's life. That's trying to be a professional athlete of any kind. You have to be very selfish in what you're doing, and you have to learn your persona. What kind of character you're going to be? What do you want to portray yourself as? Learn your speaking skills. Speaking skills is so important now because that's what gets you across. That's what gets your meaning across. You know, you're relating to people now in that school. You're talking in that. You have to really just emphasize all that stuff the best you can, you know, and it'll make you what you want to be in that in professional wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely. And to the point of like, cutting the promos and eliciting that interest and stuff like that. I mean, you worked with a lot of great managers over the years too and everything like that. Was there any like manager you like most enjoyed working with that you felt like was the most cohesive fit with your act? And I guess to that point, do you think there could be like a heavier presence with managers nowadays?
I love Fuji. Fuji was great. Fuji taught me a lot about being a big man, how to work, your persona, everything else and that stuff. Because after every match, we'd always sit down and talk about the do's and don'ts after the match, and that's which is really nice. And that made me a lot better wrestler at that time, which made me keep progressing in the sport and that stuff. Paul Jones was very good in the NWA. Paul Jones was a very good talker and that stuff. Very nice man. And he also helped me a lot too. I wish I could have talked more back then, because now I could do great interviews. Now, when I do an interview now, people are like, "Wow, how come you didn't talk like that when you're back in WWF and that stuff?" It's the way it was at that time. That's why there was managers to help you in that stuff. Which I think that's a lost art in the sport. Of professional wrestling. Now there are no more managers. People love managers. You can use managers in your match. You can do so many things with a manager, which made a lot of fun out there. And people let me. Fuji had a lot of heat. He had a lot of heat out there. Slick had heat. Because Slick was a great talker. It was great to have a manager, out there with you and that stuff, And there would be nothing wrong with, some of the guys that aren't that great at talkers. There's a lot of them that aren't that great at talkers. I don't watch it so much anymore, but I've seen bits and pieces every once in a while. And a lot of these guys are not great talkers. And it would really help them to have somebody out there to speak with them and then let them cut in at them, let them get their persona down more, let them learn more, so they're just thrust into it. Well, so they got to be this great talker, which isn't happening at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I hadn't really known about prior to like getting like heavier with the research, I noticed you had like a bit of a run in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And one of the things that I also saw was kind of curious was apparently you were initially offered the Big Van Vader persona. Can you talk about your New Japan experiences a bit? Because I find all of that fascinating.
Yeah, New Japan was great. That was a really good learning opportunity for me. I was in Kansas City at the time, and Mr. Pogo came along. He was in New Japan. He saw me there, and he saw, something in me because of the way I looked and the way I was working and that stuff. And he came up to me and said, "I'd really like you to go to Japan." And I said, "Wow, that'd be cool." Of course, going to Japan the first time is kind of a big difference from the United States. I was there for 5 weeks my very first time, which is a long time for your first time somewhere else. But it was nice seeing a different kind of style. And over there, it's a very hardcore style, very stiff. When you put things in, you put things in. I mean, you really put them in. And it was a lot of fun. It taught me a lot. I met a lot of great guys. And then by the end of the tour, they said, we'd like to do some measurements. And I said, okay, cool. They did some measurements. Well, we'd really like you, we're thinking about having you, thinking about having you do this outfit. And I said, well, thank you, but, I worked so hard on my body my whole life to make it look the way it did. Why would I want to show my body and hide it under something? Which, maybe is a little offensive to him, which I didn't mean it that way. But it's true, man. If you work so hard to have a body, why aren't you showing your body? I mean, that's part of your gimmick and that stuff. And, they kind of, I don't know if they got mad at me or whatever, but, it's just what it is and that stuff. I love them and that stuff. They were great to me in that. But, it's probably better Van Vader got it because, he didn't have a body and it worked out great for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've noticed at certain situations like WrestleMania, for instance, that you're talking about meeting Trump and Run DMC and everything like that. What are some other like pop culture interactions where you've got to meet certain people and kind of like chop it up with them just through like your efforts as a pro wrestler?
Yeah, well, there's a lot we met. A lot of them came to shows, man. So one that I really liked was it was in California, and of course it was Judd Nelson back then. Judd Nelson came up and he wanted to go out. He wanted us to go out with him that night. Took us to a couple of these places. All of them got raided. We were there. I said, "Wow, Judd, this is really cool." And he rode around this bike that was called Scumbag. It was a Harley called Scumbag. But it was a lot of fun meeting a lot of different people and that stuff. It's to see what they're about and that stuff. And just how both our thing and their thing kind of cross lines, and just a lot of fun. Corey Everson used to come to a lot of shows in L.A. Of course, she loved Hulk Hogan back then. She was in love with Hulk Hogan. She'd always be in the front row and just be decked out and just drop dead gorgeous. And of course, like you say, you talked about meeting Trump. He was also in L.A. too, and just very nice man, very very nice guy. And of course, being a president, I love it.
Yeah, and you've got to work with some of the more, notable names in the history of wrestling, guys like, Bret Hart, Hulk Hogan. I mean, working with like the Rockers and stuff like that. Is there any, I guess, tag team or individual performer that you like most enjoyed getting in there with?
I think the two tag teams, maybe three tag teams that I really enjoyed. Number one, of course, being the Road Warriors. I mean, that was just hard fought matches. I mean, just big guys going at it, doing gigantic moves. I mean, you got 300-pound guys there flying around, doing things we were doing. That just wasn't seen among huge guys. And then, of course, the Rockers were incredible. I mean, they almost had to have parachutes on them to make it so high in the air and that stuff. They knew, yeah, seriously, they knew how to work with the big guys. They knew, and we just it was ours and theirs it was a match made in history, and that's what it just made for us. And then the other one, of course, was the Hart Foundation. Working Brett and Jimmy, that's a dream and that stuff. Because there's so much history behind those guys. As far as singles, Davey Boy. Davey Boy and me matched up so perfect. It was just one of those things that just hit off perfectness. I mean, just the way I was built, the way he was built, the way we could move, and Davey was such a great wrestler. I mean, it was an honor working with him. And then, of course, getting out there and step in the ring, with legends like Tito Santana, Kimmy Superfly Snuka. I love Kimmy. And, of course, Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan, when you go to that ring, you get inside that ring, and you're sitting on the other side, and they're announcing Hulk Hogan's name, and all of a sudden he rips that shirt off, and every single camera is going off and flashes going off in the audience. I had the goosebumps. And I had to sit there for about a minute and feel all those goosebumps, so they went down. I couldn't move. Everything just went black. Like, wow, this is awesome. This is so cool.
Yeah, it must be amazing to just like, be in the thick of a situation like that. And like, yeah, to the point of the Davey Boy Smith chemistry. I mean, you guys had that great match at WrestleMania and a few other, great matches where you guys clicked and stuff like that. But maybe you should be coming back to WWE in a little bit. It seems like the Ascension's talking a little smack. Maybe you got to put them in check.
Well, we're a little bit older now, but we're maybe a step slower, but I'm still in great shape and that stuff. They may not touch too much smack, but I don't think it'll ever happen.
Oh well, I mean, who knows? I mean, you never know with WWE and everything like that, and just the the world of pro wrestling. But I want to be mindful of your time. I really appreciate all the insights you've given me. I'm curious if there's anything you want to add as a parting thought as we're wrapping up here, man.
Just I just want to thank all my fans all these years and that stuff. Thank you for all your support, being behind me and that stuff. As I always say this, I'm a big guy, but I'm just another big guy that's out there. But with all the people behind me, all the fans, they make me who I am, and the other ones that make me Warlord, which I love them so much for doing that. Because it makes me who I am today, and that's which I really appreciate from all the people.
Absolutely, and people can check out Warlord live and in person. Some great cards going on. CWE Grand Prairie happening Wednesday, August 14th, and a few other dates going to be going forward with the tour as well. August 15th in Edmonton and August 16th out in Cochrane, and people can check that out for sure. A lot of great shows, and they can also get their tickets through cwetickets.com. Thanks again for the time, man, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. I appreciate it.